What's up, guys? James and Sae'Von back again. Coming to you today with some interesting things. We kind of want to play off the made-up holiday Valentine's Day that just passed, and some recent experience with some romantic relationships. Overall, this is going to kind of be a little bit of a ping pong, a little bit of an episode that's a little all over the place. We want to go deep on romantic relationships and. Thought it was fitting to do it right after the most made-up holiday in the world, where everyone spends too much money on candy and doesn't realize that love exists out of that one day out of 365. Sae'Von, let's start with what romance is in the modern day. I've spoken to Keaton a little bit about this, and that interview can be found on YouTube. And we go very interesting and deep on dating in today's world with dating apps and what have you. What does romance look like in today's day for you? Not personally, but for a man, for a woman.
Okay.
For anyone in between.
Yeah. So, obvious disclaimer, like you just said, this is not my necessary reality. It's definitely not my reality. But what I have noticed seems to be the reality of the collective. In this instance, I'm talking about people, age 15 to 45, 50, even older than that probably. But effectively what I've noticed is that there is excess supply. Maybe not even that. What people are seeking now is very different than what people sought, let's say 100 years ago. And not that what was sought 100 years ago was necessarily right or correct, just like what's sought today isn't necessarily wrong. But what I think people are realizing, and this is the part of the impetus to how we see the trend that's developed, is people are realizing they don't have to lock themselves in. Effectively, they realize they don't have to commit. Because there's so much supply, there's a lot of optionality that people exercise. 100 years ago, it was a lot more of the mind frame. You find somebody, you meet them, maybe it's prearranged, maybe it's through whatever. Families encourage it, but people would look at those relationships or even dating as a means to an end of finality. And the destination was not optionality, but it was some sort of stability. Not necessarily even happiness either, but stability. Like, hey, I'm going to find a person, we'll be able to rock together till death do us part, because that's what the stipulation of the contract says. Now, that had its own problems, right? People staying committed to relationships that were bad for them, that did not provide them happiness, actually may have caused them suffering or pain. And then the children who may have to be brought up in those households that are loveless, that creates other cycles where they don't see love, or they see something and they think that that's love because they are together. And if you're married, then you must love each other. So all these downstream effects that we see now, where it's the opposite, where people the last thing they want to do is commit. They can pull out their cell phone, grab Bumble, grab Tinder, grab any of these other apps that I don't even know exist. Right?
Grab Hinge that I got kicked off of.
You know what I mean? All of this stuff. And then they're looking for people that they either like, are attracted to, can afford them a good time. They effectively want the situation to serve them in some way, shape, or form, tick a box, but they don't want to be locked into the expectation of longevity. And there's a lot of benefits there for a lot of, I say the main benefit is it reminds people that you don't have to lock yourself into something that is enjoyable. You don't have to lock yourself in to something that has good aspects about it. And the benefit, or I'd say the follow-up to that would be that it should, in my opinion, encourage people to be more considerate and mindful of what it is they're seeking in a partner. And so that eventually, if they do find out what they want, it opens the door back up to maybe they make a decision to commit or sign up for that longevity in some way, shape, or form. But what I feel has happened instead is that it has just perpetuated this culture of short-term gratification, which everybody's heard before, but then it makes it so that it is tougher for anybody who might be looking for a more long-term commitment sort of situation. They kind of get pushed out of the market because that's not what the market trend shows as being in demand. And so those people get marginalized. Then they become potentially disgruntled or pessimistic about their romantic options or viability, which then drives them back into the market again as these short-term buyers leasing. because in their mind, there's no point in thinking about the long term, because if they were to seek that, then they may be the only party in that dynamic wanting the long term, and then the short term thinking person may make short term decisions that can cause pain to the long term. So, I mean, that's an oversimplification. But, yeah.
Some would say a massive oversimplification of what it looks like out here. But it is interesting, though, when you look at what the majority, what the majority of people that are in the singles age, and I think it's even kind of a misnomer to say that there's an age range that everyone's single in,
Right.
because that would be you would be presupposing that we're still in this tradition. Married in mid to late 20s, has 4 kids, lives happy ever after, or lives terribly ever after in their big house, keeping up with the Joneses. I don't think that that's necessarily the destiny for everyone now. I think that it's interesting to see how many organized belief systems perpetuate the track of going into a committed relationship young, sometimes prearranged, sometimes only with the blessing of thy Father, thy Son, and thy Holy Spirit. And even some other organized religions. It's very interesting to me to see that there's many people that still subscribe there. And if you're voluntarily subscribing to that, good on you. That's a you thing. If you're going not against your will into that scenario, then okay. I mean, I can't really have about that. But I do think it is interesting for someone like myself who finds myself in a spot where I don't know what the hell I want. I don't know. I know that I don't want cheap tricks. I know that I don't want 92, one night stands. I know that. I know I also don't want to run up the bank account at 5 Bar and Bar Taco and blow all my cash on frivolous conversation that never goes deeper than what my middle name even is.
Yeah.
But it's interesting being mid-20s as we are, I think, to see in multiple areas people our age that are wildly happy being where they're at and married and already have kids. My first girlfriend in 7th grade, and she might listen to this, and so Hannah, much love to you always. She's got multiple kids already. She's 25, 26? 26. She's got 1 kid and is pregnant, or has 2 kids and is pregnant. Is married to a guy that went to Georgia Tech. She went to West Georgia. Super cool girl. Still keep in contact with her. Don't talk much, but keep in contact with her every now and again. But she's ridiculously happy. Loves her significant other. Loves her kids. Has already brought multiple humans into this earth, and is very much living out part of her purpose by bringing kids and raising them in the proper manner. Now, that's a conversation for a different day, because what is proper, whatever. But let's just simplify that and gloss there for a second and keep moving. It's interesting to see someone that I dated in 7th grade, pulling my football helmet off in 7th grade, trying to go in for the kiss, and she straight denied me, and that was the end of our relationship, if it even was a relationship. But it's interesting to see someone that I grew up with that is living a completely different life than I am, almost polar opposite. Now, that's not to say that I'm out here, swinging Richards and running around. I'm not. But it is interesting to see someone that I grew up with leading a completely life and thoroughly enjoying it. Someone that I have a lot of commonalities with, and I vibe with at a very high level, living a completely different life, raising kids in her 20s. It's very interesting for me to see, because I think that is not necessarily a narrative that's pushed down everybody's throat. I think that growing up in the Baptist church, that's a narrative that's definitely supported. I mean, organized religion definitely pushes, hey, you need to find the one, you need to be pure. So the sanctity of marriage is on your left hand, and the deacon said you're allowed to. And I don't think that there's necessarily anything negative about you taking that path if you want to.
You want to.
At all. I don't think there's anything wrong with that in the slightest. But I think it's very interesting, the middle ground that a lot of people find themselves in.
Yeah.
And even I'm sitting in where like, I'm not getting married in my 20s. That won't be happening.
Yeah.
I won't be having kids in my 20s. Okay? You can't ever say never, but I do not have plans set forth to have children, to have children be birthed from me.
You're not having kids right now.
Yeah, I'm like, I'll say it 4 more times if I need to. I'm not. But it is, I don't know. It's an interesting place to be in, though, because I know that I don't want that. But when we're going into, and I know that you were saying that, you explaining about where relationally people are in the day-to-day is not necessarily the framework that you're operating in. I totally get that. I sit more in a place where like, where am I going?
Yeah.
What do I want? How do I find what I want without spending 6 months at a time, 17 times over, getting to know somebody just to realize there's a fatal flaw or there's something in my mind that, I'm hyper judgmental on or super insecure about. So let me flip that script there. It might be I'm the problem, right? But how do I know that without going down so many damn relationships?
Yeah. That's a really good point. You made a lot of good points. And if I try to address them, I think to your point, there is no, and I think we started this conversation like this, there's no right, there's no wrong way to do a relationship. Yeah. There are actions and tendencies that may lead you closer or further away from a particular outcome. And it's good to take the time to think about it. I think the biggest benefit collectively that we're experiencing right now is for one of the first times, and what I understand as modern history, there has been a consideration of, does this romantic relationship framework make sense? It's going through its period where it is being individualized to the unique individual person. And I think what we see in the interim is the consequence of trying to navigate those waters en masse when you have tens of millions of people who don't have that clarity. And so if you don't have that clarity, you may not necessarily want to be completely removed from the experiences because there's some wisdom in staying out of the game until you've given it some thought. But then, as you said, how are you supposed to get any more information, meet more people, have more experiences, which can greatly inform your perspective without getting out in the field? And so I think it's up to ultimately each individual, right, to try to take an inventory of where they're at. And so that gets started simply as considering, because I grew up with a friend, and at one point in time, we kind of had a little thing going, and this was in college, so it wasn't 7th grade, you know what I mean? So stakes in some ways are a little bit higher, Yeah. Momentary decisions can bring about a lifetime of consequences, and good and bad, right? But as we were growing up, there was kind of this running joke of like, damn, so-and-so always got a boyfriend. Like, she just broke up with a nigga, and she got another boyfriend. It hasn't even been 30 days, sort of thing. And so only reason I bring that up is because let's say you're this person, right? You're listening. Has that person ever stopped to notice that there's a pattern of never having spent time by themselves, not trying to be in a relationship? I had to ask myself this question. The person I'm with now, there was a lag time of a few months, but it's not like I took years off from my prior relationship, which was years long. So I had to stop and ask myself, damn, am I rushing? I mean, everybody's heard about rebounds, that sort of thing. But I think the reason that rebounds are frowned upon is because generally there is some collective perspective that bouncing from one situation, relationship, dynamic where you're literally interacting on a regular, probably daily basis with a whole nother human being that has their own set of emotions, goals, dreams, hope, fears, family, relationships, friends, group. You have to basically ingratiate yourself in that entire ecosystem, or you probably wind up doing that to some degree if you're involved with this person. And so if that involvement ceases or ends, terminates, to pull yourself out of that whole vortex is a lot to go through. Because in some ways you may be losing parts of what are in there. And that whole little dynamic, that microcosm, I do believe is a part of why we have seen historically a lot of people stay in relationships that maybe they shouldn't be in, is because they're not thinking about if the relationship ends, they're considering more heavily all the other things that will be lost, quote unquote, if they're detached from that person, because they may get plugged out of that vortex, removed from it, which they may have enjoyed some benefits of, people in, what have you. But what we see today, to your point, how do you figure that out? I think the first step is that whether it means somebody has to figure it out by themselves, but you don't necessarily have to do that, You can be doing this while you're dating people. You can be doing this while you're courting people. You can be doing this while you're in a long-term relationship. There has to be thought and consideration given to what does an individual want, right? And it's hard to know what you want if you don't know who you are and where you're at, because those things change over time. The type of woman that I wanted when I was in, it's just funny saying that, middle school, right? The type of girl that I wanted in middle school is not necessarily the same sort of woman I'm pursuing now. And I think that's a great thing, because if your tastes haven't changed, either you had exquisite taste as a youngin', or you haven't matured very much. And I think that sometimes it's very easy to get caught in the hustle and bustle, because if you're constantly dating people, if you're constantly, you go on a date, oh, it was trash, we didn't click, we didn't vibe, whatever, you can immediately, before the date's even over, you got people shopping for the next option. And if somebody's to do that, it disincentivizes an individual to spend effort working on that particular situation, because the truth is, there's never a perfect relationship. There's never the perfect person for any individual, right? No one person, and I had to hear this, and understand it and not take it personally. No one person is going to fulfill every single checkbox or desire of anybody. And there has to be the acknowledgement of that and the acceptance and recognizing that is okay. Because if you go into a relationship, and I've kind of been in this situation before, and you put that pressure on the counterparty, on the partner there, it can ultimately end in more harm than good, because too much of a burden is placed on it. Almost too much importance is placed on, which may sound paradoxical, that somebody could be in a long-term relationship, working their way towards marriage or whatever that looks like for them, and then make sure that they don't put too much importance on that other person. Because if you do that, then that can be where you find a lot of people who are incomplete themselves, pairing with other incomplete people. And as you know, anything times less than one is less than one. So that's why, in my opinion, the bedrock of that is doing the work. And I believe it's a task that is done until one transcends this plane. But to do that work of figuring out, who am I right now? Where am I at right now? Gauging that to the future. Because if and then saying, all right, with that understanding, what do I seek? What do I need? What will fulfill the role? What purpose am I trying to serve by finding a partner, by dating casually, by being polyamorous, whatever that box is? Like you said, there's a lot of different ways to eat the chickpeas these days, right? But to me, that's a logical place to begin, to wind up arriving at the solution, the answer, faster.
Do you feel, you said something very interesting to me, that no one person will fulfill everything for you. So what's the answer to that? That we then have multiple people that collectively fulfill everything? Or is it hey, you know what? No one person can do it. Mm-hmm. So you just have to be okay with good enough and collectively fulfilling, 1 through 7, maybe mm-hmm. not 1 through 10. Because I find, and this is going to be interesting when these people listen to this mm-hmm. also, but I was in a relationship. I was in a very interesting relationship at the end. I guess that was 2017. That was 2017, fall of 2017. And I was in a spot where, I wasn't monogamously committed to one person. Mm-hmm. I was in a spot where I was dating, not frivolously. Yeah. I was dating with intention. I was spending quality time. I was phone away, hanging out with that individual. But there was more than one individual, right? Mm-hmm. And it was a very small amount of people. It was actually 2 people. But it was a time when I really started to question what a long-term relationship looked like. Yeah. Okay, and for anyone that's close to me, they know what happened a mere 2 months after this, and we'll go into that on another podcast. But it had me start to question the narrative that I was pushed when I was younger. That hey, you need to you need to find a wife, you need to court said individual, you need to get down on one knee and propose mm-hmm. sooner than later, because she's not going to be able to have kids after 30-something.
Tick, tick, tock.
Yeah, so there's a body clock on it. There's hey, your parents have to like them. But hey, you also need to have a You need to have a career, and you need to be making money, because if you're not the man and you can't support her, you shouldn't be with her in the first place. Very interesting to see that that's the way that I grew up. Terrible linguistics there. That's the way that I grew up, but I started to question if that was the right way. And I don't know that I sit before you here today and I have an answer. I don't know that the traditional frame, cookie cutter taken out of a box and placed on my lap necessarily fits where I'm going or what I'm looking for, but it was very interesting to have an experience where it was a much deeper emotional connection with two individuals, a much deeper it's a counter to your point there that two places less than, like, two people that are less than one coming together. I literally, they knew differently. They both publicly knew me, but they knew me privately differently, and they fulfilled different emotional spaces in my life. I didn't hike with both of them. One of them I worked out with. The other one I went and did adventure stuff with. It was just very interesting. I know this sounds like James, what are you talking about? You just had a list of... No, it was a connection that I don't know why I never gave room to speak about it or to think about it or to journal about it, like we're doing here right now about this topic, because it's something that continuously comes back up on the tail end of shitty singular relationships, monogamous relationships. Well, what if, or what about that? This situation always comes back up in my mind. Is that the way that we should be? If nobody does fulfill everything in your life, is it the job of you to find somebody else that helps fulfill that? Or is it for you to just be unfulfilled? And because you're fulfilled enough with one person, that it should just be chalked up to, that's life. And you just stay with one person. And I don't have the answer. And
I have some thoughts. I don't have the answer.
I don't need you to have the answer. I want to hear your thoughts on that, though, because it kind of, in some ways, it sounds a little pessimistic. And I get that that's all perception, but oh, well, if they can't fulfill everything, I'll just throw baby out with the bathwater.
To your point, right? So you mentioned the thing about not any one person, you being more fulfilled effectively when you had a non-monogamous relationship, when you were basically dating multiple people. Let's just call it that, right?
For sure, that's what it was.
You were dating multiple people, which was often what dating is. Dating can be a series of dates or a series of encounters, time spent with one person. It could be a series with several people, right? But that's effectively dating to me. And then you made the point about monogamy. You made the point about it coming back up after bad relationships. So I think these all speak to different things. And to condense it down, you basically, as I mentioned before, understanding what somebody's looking for. If you know that you want adventure and you also want fitness, right, out of a partnership with somebody, and you can't get that with one person.
It sounds so surface level as you're saying that back to me.
But, just because we're giving this the context. We can't speak for every variability in existence.
For sure.
But let's just take those two things. If you are romantically involved with one person who gives you, let's say, one of those attributes, well, then it doesn't mean that that person shouldn't qualify necessarily because they don't get the second attribute. That goes back into the value system. Do you need both those boxes to be ticked by the same entity, right? So, for instance, I may hold a value of honesty, and I may hold a value of grace in who I choose to have a partnership with romantically. Now, those are two qualities that I just expressed are valuable to me. Just like in your situation, exercise and adventure were valuable. But I don't necessarily need a business partner of mine to be graceful. I may need them to be honest as well, but I don't need them to be graceful necessarily because I don't value that in a business partnership. If I'm sitting down with somebody for us to see how we can create something of value and make profit off of it and distribute it to other people. So I think that's part of what people got to think about when they're considering romantic relationships. Because even if intellectually humor, just all these different things that often can be divorced. Because if we're keeping it blunt, one of the core factors that defines, if we're just keeping it blunt, a romantic relationship is the physical relationship innate in it. Otherwise, all these things we talk about often are shared between good friends, right? And growing up, most of my really good friends, or let me not say most, I had a lot of really good friends that were women, that were girls. And I had some homies,
Very few homies, though.
and so, I had like 3 or 4. I didn't really have a huge circle. But I think I was able to go such a long time without feeling necessarily like I was missing out on a relationship because I was still able to spend time with women who were beautiful. I was able to spend time and get their opinion, get the humor, get the grace, get the feminine energy from them because, once again, that's also what I was seeking, right? A lot of people, men, heterosexual, make an assumption, man, heterosexual woman is usually looking for their counter polarity, right? And we'll get deeper into this and we'll drop some game on another episode. But effectively, you figure that out and you find out what is necessary in terms of attributes that have to come from that person that you're engaging with physically, if we're going to use that as the distinction, the step change value of a romantic relationship. And if it's not that, and it's not anything that you would feel hurt by or violated if whoever you were in a partnership sought from another person, once again, you got to establish that, right? If it's against the rules to dance, with somebody else. No, seriously, I had a good friend. She went swing dancing, at UGA with somebody who wasn't her boyfriend, and then she had somebody she was dating. To them, that wasn't a boundary cross, but maybe going camping for a weekend, in some mountains, and it's just the two of you, maybe that's off limits to somebody that's not the romantic partner. So all of these come with some sort of understanding or framework of what is fair play and what's foul play. And I think the reason that a lot of people will have a reflection after poor relationships is it's the reminder that they still have not figured out what they want out of the relationship and then how they should steer that or most optimally arrive at that.
Yeah, I think that's also, another thing that comes up when you have just a bad taste in your mouth after a poor relationship. A lot of that has to do with maybe your expectation with the relationship. And then also maybe the unhealed trauma. From childhood and other things that you haven't addressed.
Yeah.
So
whole nother can of worms.
Yeah. And I don't really I let's not keep the people for another hour here.
Yeah.
I think we can address both of those two things, even in the framework of romantic relationships or relationships in general down the road. But I think that we kind of dove into some things today.
Yeah. So big takeaways. What's 2 takeaways for you?
Know what you want. And if you don't know what you want, seek understanding in what you want. And that's going to require a whole lot of things. But first and foremost, it's going to require you to give yourself space to think. From that, you're going to need to probably write down your thoughts. And then I would say the other takeaway, having 2 takeaways, the other takeaway is going to be patience. You got to have patience. If you rush the first step, you end up in a place where you shouldn't be. And you can take a lesson from every place you shouldn't be. Mm-hmm. But do you want to keep burning your fingers and your hands every time you touch the stove, or do you want to just stop touching the stove?
Yeah.
What about you?
Communication. Communication with self through your points of that reflection, and then communicating with whoever that counterparty is, whether it's casual dating, whether it's polyamorous, whether it's monogamous, whatever it is, short term, long term, no expectation term, communicate. And that often will help ease the process, even if there's a little bit of growing pain there. But yeah, man, this is the relationship series. We're going to get back after it. This is just one of many installments, and we appreciate your time. Thank y'all.
Thank you much.